Hello everyone, I'm Jennifer Jiggis with Quilters Select, and today I want to share with you some information on how to make half square triangles and 3/4 square triangles quickly and easily. So we're going to be using the Quilters Select 3-in-1 ruler. And at one end of the ruler you have all of your markings for half square triangles. At the other end we have all of our markings for making quarter square triangles, and then it also includes the markings for squares from 1 inch up to 6.5 inches, all in one convenient ruler. Now when this ruler was being developed, we were developing it specifically for the half square and 3/4 square triangles. But then as we started using it, we realized that it also works beautifully if you are mitering borders or really mitering any kind of an edge. The nipped off end on each of the triangle corners also gives you a nice little space to be able to go back and nip any triangle shapes that you might be stitching. It's also wonderful if you do any stitch and flip type block construction, because again you have that built-in mitered edge or angled edge, so you can quickly trim away any of those excess edges. So how does this ruler work? Well, let's have a look for those that are thinking, what is a quarter square or a half square triangle? Oftentimes when we are making quilt blocks, you're going to see that quarter or that half-inch block showing up in lots and lots of places. So here what we see is a block that consists of 2 half square triangles. Here's our square, and here's that triangle area. So with the half square triangle ruler, we can cut these quickly and easily and have a nice clipped off edge so that construction at the machine is that much easier to do. Now there are lots of ways that you can stitch half square triangles. Some patterns may suggest that you stitch 2 squares together, right sides together, and then cut in half between the seams. And that works beautifully when you're creating half square triangles, as long as the fabrics are not directional. So as you can see with these 2 fabrics, we have a stripe. If we want to be able to control which direction the stripe lands, as we might want to do in this particular block, all of my stripes I wanted to go in a planned orientation. So using that stitch and clip method makes it a little harder for me to be able to figure out which direction my stripes are going to go. Also, when you're cutting a stripe using this particular method for your half square triangles, you will find that your stripes are not all going to be orientated correctly. You'll have some scraps that you're not able to use. But with the 3-in-1 ruler, we always know which direction those lines are going to go. All right, so let's take a look at how that works. For this we cut our fabrics first in strips, which is a little different than some of the other methods for your half square and your quarter square triangle units. So the strip set that we cut for this is according to what size is this unit. So we're going to pretend, or we could measure it, we're going to pretend that we want this to finish at 4 inches. So to finish at 4 inches, our very simple math is to add a 1/2 inch. So we need a 4.5 inch strip. So we're going to start with 2 fabrics that we will pre-cut down to that 4.5 inch strip size. Now these are some scraps that I had in my sewing space. I don't even know what size this one is. Let's hope it's at least 4.5 inches. And I'll use one of my traditional rulers. Tip: when you are cutting your strip sets, or really anything, I don't pay much attention to the lines on my ruler, or the lines on my mat. The lines on my ruler are much more important. And so I'll place my ruler down on my fabric, and this particular piece, you know what, we're going to make units that finish at 3 inches instead of 4. Okay, I have my fabrics aligned. I just need to square off this one edge. So we're going to make that first cut, and then we're just going to rotate this right around, and see how nicely your non-slip rulers from Quilters Select hold that fabric in place so that you're able to just turn this right around. I don't have to worry about the edge of my fabric shifting or going anywhere. And now I'm going to move my ruler over to that 3.5 inch line, because we've decided that we're going to make 3 inch finished units, and make our second cut. So we now have our 3.5 inch strip of fabric 1, And we're going to join it with fabric 2. So let's go ahead and cut our second strip. That's going to be 3.5 inches. We'll make the first cut to straighten up that edge. Now I mentioned that I'm not really paying attention to the mat. I'm watching the ruler. So I have the straight edge, the folded edge of the fabric along a straight edge, a straight line on the ruler. And then we're going to square up this kind of wonky edge. So we'll square it. We'll just shift this right around, and again, that non-slip surface is holding my fabric beautifully in place. We're going to go to that 3.5 inch line. I don't really care what's happening on the mat. I'm dealing with the lines on the ruler. I find that I'm far more accurate that way. And we'll cut our second set of fabric. Okay, we now have two 3.5 inch strips of fabric that we are ready to cut for our half square triangles to give us 3-inch finished square units. Okay. Now it's not necessary to cut or to layer these the way that I'm doing, but it's going to make it a little faster when I get to my sewing machine because I'll have my two fabrics ready to go and already aligned to cut my triangles. Okay, for the half square triangle ruler, we're going to start with those half squares. So it's 2 triangles in a unit. First thing we need to do is to cut our angle. So I'm going to align my 3.5 inch line on the half square triangle end. And by the way, it will tell you right here, half square triangle unit. And so you know what shape you're cutting for. If we wanted quarter square triangle units, we're going to cut from this side where we see the picture of the quarter square triangles. All right. It is possible, if you get distracted as you are stitching, that your strips may not be 100% accurate. So this is your double check. Is my 3.5 inch line aligned properly at the edge of my fabric? And is that little blunted edge of the ruler on the other side of the fabric? And then we cut away the excess so we get that angle started. Now we've got a lot of strip hanging over here on the side, so we are going to just flip this around. In this case, there's a lot of fabric there to try to just rotate on the mat. Okay, then we're going to turn our ruler around, align the angle with the angle that we have already cut in our fabric. At home, make this nice and tidy as you work out to the side. For the magic of video, it doesn't really matter so much. Okay, and we'll make our cut. We will rotate the ruler so that we're aligning the straight edge along the straight edge of the fabric. My 3.5 inch line is aligned with the raw edge of the fabric. That nipped edge at the top is aligned with the other edge. And we'll make our cut. And then we'll rotate that ruler. The angle is aligned with the angle on my fabric. The 3.5 inch line is aligned with the raw edge of the fabric and the tip at the other end. And we'll cut. Now, once we go to the machine, the reason for this nipped off edge is to help us align and know exactly where to stitch as we get started at our machine, so that you can see this a little more easily. Okay, you know that we sew right sides together. So we will take our two fabrics. They're already right sides together because that's the way that we cut them, the two contrasting pieces. This edge, or this little nip right here, this indicates where the needle should align when I put my units underneath the presser foot on the machine to start stitching. So from right here to right here is going to give us that perfect 1/4 inch. So now we know exactly where to get started as we're stitching. Once these are sewn together, you've already nipped off those little dog ears. You don't need to worry about them and any bulk that you might have at this end. Now sometimes we may have to move fabrics around, and so you may find that it's beneficial to come back before you do your stitching, use your ruler, and clip off the dog ears from the other end. You can do this before you ever start stitching your units together so that it will eliminate bulk right at the very beginning, and you now have the flexibility or the ease. You can stitch from either side of the unit according to what's going to make a little bit more sense for the piece that you're working with. Now, to cut our 3/4 units, and those would look like our 3/4 units, or our quarter square units. That would be a block like we see here. Now in this case, we have 2 half square units that are 2 quarter square units joined to a half square unit. You may, depending on what you're stitching, have units that are comprised of 4 little triangles, as we see here. Now, when I mentioned having the flexibility when I'm using this ruler of cutting my fabric so that my stripes go in exactly the orientation that I'm looking for, that's where we see the beauty of using the ruler here. Because as I lay my ruler down over my strips, I can see right away which direction that stripe will appear. Okay? Which is something that's a little bit difficult to do if you're using one of the stitch and trim type quarter square or half square triangle construction methods. Okay. So we can take our same strip set. So here, these are going to make pretty big triangles or pretty big squares. Same cutting sequence. We're going to line our dotted line up with the raw edge of the fabric, our nipped edge up with the other end. We're going to cut that first triangle. We're going to rotate that first edge, rotate our fabric right around, and then cut our second, or make our second cut. Rotate the ruler, confirm that our raw edge is on the 3.5 inch line, our nipped edge is at the top, and click. So now when we open up the units, the little triangles, all of those nipped edges go to the center. Your bias is contained here. There's no bias to the outside. We would join the 2 triangles together, stitching down this length. And again, you've got that nipped edge, so you can place that point, goes right at the needle, so that we have a nice accurate 1/4 inch seam. Same thing with the other segment, right here, and we'd stitch down through, and then stitch the 2 of them together to complete your 3/4 triangle unit. So I'm sure that as you're playing with these rulers, you're going to find more and more applications and ways to experiment with the ruler, ways to make your cutting a little bit more accurate. And as you have a look on our webpage, you'll find that there's a primer exercise for the 3-in-1 ruler, which will take you through how to construct a very basic project that uses half and quarter square units. It uses quarter square units and uses half square units. So have a look at our Quilters Select 3-in-1 ruler page for more information and details on how to use your 3-in-1 ruler. Thank you.